and how exciting it is. I think one of the biggest industry that we've all really suddenly started realizing how much they're really doing for their community is the care industry, right? When we all came out and we all started clapping and we all started being so grateful for the nurses, the doctors, all the practitioners who really were here during that pandemic, isn't it been an incredible, incredible time? And so today, to talk to us about that kind of incredible industry, I have the pleasure to have Feng Shui expert Julie all the way from New Orleans, which is New Thumpton, Northampton. Is that right?
In New England, and I'm from New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. Sorry, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It's the French girl in me. I can't say the words. And Julie, so I kind of watched you doing a conference a few days ago, and I kind of thought, oh, I just love Julie. I really need to speak to you and really kind of see, because you really have niched and you really have specialized your Feng Shui into the care industry, haven't you?
I have. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yes, I did.
So tell us a little bit about how did you get into Feng Shui in the first place? Right. We all have a story, don't we?
You're absolutely right. And I would love to share my story with you, Claire, and to all your watchers and listeners out there. And my story began about like similar to your story about 10 or 12 years ago. And I was worked at a school for children with special needs, and I was a school nurse. There were four of us, four nurses that worked in this office, and we were waiting for professional day. Professional day was coming up, and we were, all the children were home for the day, and the person that was going to be the presenter that they were flying in canceled. So they were stuck. They had no idea what to do with, for a program. So what they decided to do was ask everyone to talk about what they did in their spare time.
Okay.
So one of the women got up and talked about how she ran 10 miles a day getting ready for the Boston Marathon. Well, that didn't sound very relaxing because it was supposed to be what you did to relax. But another woman got up and talked about her interest in Feng Shui. And we all knew that her office had a different feel to it. It was almost like a Zen feel. And we thought, as school nurses, wait a minute, what if we use that little handout she gave us and we reworked our office so that all the students, so there was a different flow and that each of the areas had a particular job to do. So that we had an area for we gave medications, an area where there was a bed, a couch where the students could rest if they needed to. So a different, and a separate place where the students needed some counseling and all of that. And our nurse manager was actually a Reiki practitioner, and she also worked with crystals, and she had this big, beautiful crystal on her desk. So what we noticed was once we changed the flow of the office, so we had them come in one door, they got to the different stations for what they needed. As they were leaving the office, they would put their hand on this beautiful crystal and that they were so attracted to, and they would comment about how beautiful it was, and then off they went back to class. And as a school nurse, your goal is to get the students back to class. We always had no lingering in the nurse's office, so we sent them on their way. From then, I really got interested in Feng Shui, and I went to a local program in New England, in Connecticut, and then further went on to a master's program in New York, working with Cadro Crystal, who is one of Professor Lynn Young's proteges. So she's now running the program, and she's just a beautiful, lovely spirit. And I was going through these programs, I said to myself, similar to your story, which was, oh my goodness, I can apply this to these very chaotic areas because we just did that. And why can't we take that more globally and look at how does our space work when the environment is so chaotic that you can't that it's tough to function.
Mm.
And as I moved along in my nursing career, the first thing I would do when I would go into an office, which was, of course, or a different space, was, of course, you know the answer, declutter, because they're for some reason, in
Mm.
nursing offices or medical offices, they seem to have so many things they don't need now because most of it's online. So you can find those policy and procedure books from 1972 that are up on a shelf or just all kinds of outdated material. So I started to remove that. And what I found was that it's catchy. Like once you start the process, other people think, wait a minute, this is starting to feel really, really good. And this is starting to make a difference in our space. Things
Mm.
just automatically started to calm down. So really it just began with decluttering the different areas that I was in at the time.
Mm.
And from there, people started to get interested because I would, talk about feng shui and people would ask questions about it. And want to know so much. It sounds I like the word woo woo, but it really isn't, is it? It's really just, it's so much common sense to what's behind it.
Mm.
So I just took all of that and I was working in one of the big Boston hospitals and I had an opportunity to during Nurses Week. I get a lot of calls to chat during Nurses Week and I put together a lovely presentation, but the hospital also allowed me to go around and take pictures.
Mm.
And so I was able to add those to the PowerPoints. And because my job as one of the supervisors was to walk around, so I had a very close knowledge of all the different units and how they ran and, affecting, everything from morale to burnout to, nurses that leave for whatever reason. So I had a very good understanding. And when I put up the power presentations, I simply used their entrance to the units. So I would walk in and they all had double doors that opened and then there was a big board that they could, post things on. And some of them I would walk in and the boards said, "Welcome to North 7." And then they had beautiful pictures. And others, you open the door and it had research and little tiny, like the research for whatever unit they were on, whether it be, I think it was a cardiac unit. So there was all these posters on. Well, that's not very welcoming, is it? When you walk in, you want to see the big "Welcome to North 7. We're going to take care of you because we care."
Yeah.
So I was able to put all those up in my PowerPoint and talked about the how I felt walking through the units and sort of the stress, and talked about and some of the areas we couldn't do much about. So you couldn't necessarily move the nurses station to an area that wasn't so um, you know, usually when you walk into a nurse's unit in a clinical environment, you open the door and the nurse's station is right there. So it's like, here comes all that, all that rushing energy. It's right there. But we talked about how they could use lighting or different things to kind of slow that energy so that the secretaries, the nurses, the doctors, the interns all felt a little safer in that environment, that they felt like they were more protected in that area. And I started to notice some of the, and they all, after my presentation, they all began to, again, their eyes are a little bit opened, and they were started to see what I was trying to explain to them. And we could see some changes in some of the units that they seemed to come down. We talked about lots of things. We talked about lighting. We talked about smells. We talked about trying to think, windows, if there were windows, what the view is out the window. We talked about the entrance to the facility. Interestingly enough, this particular facility didn't have a main entrance per se. It was actually underneath one of the a railway. It was part of like one of the railway stops, the train stops. It was a very interesting setting. And as you walked through the main corridor, one of the restaurants that served coffee and breakfast was Au Bon Pain. So what's pain in French, right? Au Bon Pain is what we saw here in New England, and I thought, well, that's interesting for an entrance into the hospital. So we talked about that, and we talked about the lobby, and two things. One, the lobby. Some of that they could work on. It was very easy to because one was directions. There was very little directions, and directionally you really didn't know where to go. And was the other part we talked about was there was no cafeteria. So where's the one place that everybody is able to congregate and everyone is able to kind of decompress a little bit, and you get into sort of your own groups and you can talk? And there was none of that in this particular facility. It was fascinating to me. They had lots of little, throughout the facility, they had the hospital, they had lots of little cafes, and of course, it was downtown Boston. So, I mean, it wasn't like people could certainly go out and get what they wanted, but there was no area to really congregate and to really talk about what was happening in their world that particular day.
Having a community spirit within. Yeah.
Exactly.
That little community spirit within. Yeah.
Exactly. You're exactly right. And we talked about, lastly, and we talked a lot about this, was the Zen space. Where do people go to regenerate, especially nurses? And there's actually research, or I was reading, that if nurses want to go and spend a few minutes alone to kind of get themselves pulled together, they go into the bathroom. And that's the only place that they can, right, exactly, that they can lock the door and go, ah. So we talked to the administration about creating a Zen space where folks can go and just, have a rocking chair and just rock, or, have a quiet, activity, maybe a quiet space, or maybe a more active space where folks can go and just kind of chat and have a more of a community spirit. So there was so much around this this facility that really could work to pull the entire all the employees together to feel more cohesive in the environment.
And
So
it's
it was
interesting, Julie, because really what you've done really and intuitively, this is the work that I do with the company in terms of the customer journey.
Yes.
Right? You go outside
Exactly.
and you walk through as if you were customers. What do you see? What can you hear? What can you taste? And you're just doing it that way. And actually, by just doing as simply that walk around as if you were a customer and as if you were an employee. So doing it through the back door, from the employee's point of view, you start realizing how much is missing in those areas. And that's really
right.
like mapping the customer journey, isn't it?
It is. It is. And having of course, because I was intimate with all those areas, I also had some of the related information about what was the happenings behind those particular areas too. So I was able to help the nurse managers look at their area and why they might feel more chaotic than they need to be, that they had some control, because a lot of times in those environments that are, busy and active, and a lot of the what's happening is out of their control, but in fact it isn't, because they can control a little bit more with, and I think on the call I talked about noise too.
Yes.
There's a lot of research on noise in hospital environments and how loud it is. And in one of the ICUs, they had a big stoplight, red, yellow, green light, and it was big. And if they had it in the nurses station, and if it got too loud, the light would go yellow and then red. So it just gave you a sense of how loud the area can be. And it is, sometimes it was mind-boggling how loud it was sometimes.
That is really interesting, actually, because yesterday I was doing a rooming on Clubhouse, and actually we were talking about the five senses, and one of the another Feng Shui experts talked about actually the shashi of the noise.
That's right.
So we talk about the pointing bits, the pointing arrows when you got your desk, or when you got, certain pieces in your home which, have got those arrows, but the noise is those arrows, and it kind of constant noises pick your brain, and it just hits you all day long, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Not only does your brain get fatigued, your whole body gets fatigued. I mean, you just get so exhausted.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that's also, I mean, I'm a hospital, and me, it's the smell for me, in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I went quite a few years ago, my sister was in hospital for her wisdom tooth. So we went to visit her. And by the time we got to her, I was on the floor, passed out next to her. We had to call the doctors, and they're like, no, not for her, for her. Just because of the smell. And this is real. There's a real intense smell in hospital, isn't it? What do you suggest, or how can you remedy this?
Again, great question. So sometimes it's as simple as knowing what the smell is and then just taking care of it right away, so that it doesn't, permeate throughout the building. And we talked a little bit, or at that time we talked much more about aromatherapy and sort of what types of aromas. And then, but we have to be, it has to be very subtle, because of course there's, people are afraid of allergies with a particular scent. But we talked about just having just sort of a subtle, when you walk in, having a subtle smell, so that it grounds the unit, whether it be lavender or something very calming, that when you walk in, it's like, oh, okay, you can take a deep breath, because when you walk into somebody, you're just, like you just said, you're just so afraid, and you're thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to see? What am I going to hear? What am I going to smell? There is so much, but you need to be able to take that deep breath, and then let your head settle. No different than our own homes, right? It's no different. Than our homes, and then enter, so that you have we talk about in Feng Shui having a landing place. So someplace you open the door, land, readjust all of our senses, and then move forward. So that's what we talked about. So that's kind of it. You going back, adding again, we talked about layers in Feng Shui, and how we merge all of our worlds and our knowledge as Feng Shui consultants. And certainly aromatherapy is one of those that's really up and coming. And more hospitals are, are using this as a form of taking care of what what one used to be the typical smell in the hospital, and making sure that changes a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in any industry, I mean, I've always been a big fan of the five senses and how it connects with our customers on an emotional level and, kind of creating
Right.
sensorial experiences. There's so many brands now who are creating their own brand and they also, I've even created my own brand, my own perfume a couple of years ago.
Oh, good for you. Wow.
Just to show that you can do it and how much actually brings and people get a real anchor with it, isn't it? That's
Right. It's what you associate
mm,
with that for sure. Yeah. So I had nursing students when I was teaching nursing for a while, and this was in the classroom, and I had read somewhere that if you have a particular smell when you're studying
mm,
and you brought that same smell with you while you were taking your test, that
yes.
you would do better. So I had a whole classroom of students smelling whatever it was. Somebody had basil, somebody had orange. It was very funny.
Yeah, definitely. It is very powerful. I got my children to do that when their exams as well.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's another thing as well that is really it's all the subconscious, isn't it? Because hospital is really related to anxiety, stress, really worrying, and
Yes.
um, negative emotions more so than positive emotion. Maybe when you come out, it becomes positive, but when you come in, there's always that anxiety in that experience. What am I going to experience? And people are making up a lot of things. How do
Yep.
you help that kind of try to manage those kind of emotions in a hospital environment?
Right. I think that that happens right as you walk into the
Mm,
facility. So remember, we talked about, um, I, I talked about on the call, like having, you want wherever you walk into to give you the emotional hug when you walk in, right? Like, I'm going to take care of you no
mm,
matter what happens around. I want to hug you and tell you it's going to be all right. You want your house to do that when you walk in.
mm,
Oh, you've been out all day, you're tired when you get home, and then when you open that door, you want the house to say, "Welcome, I've been waiting for you all day." And you want that facility to do the same thing. So it's immediate when you walk in the door.
mm,
What is it that gives you that hug? So I think the impression is, and more facilities are doing this and much more attentive as they're building new hospitals. And I'm just gathering this from my reading and my research and seeing what folks are doing to do, thinking about less about the sterile white environment and
mm,
more about how do we offer using color, how
mm,
do we and plants and the environment, how do we bring the environment in so that there is a time, a place to transition from, oh my gosh, what am I going to see, to the hug,
mm,
to the environment that is so peaceful, so zen.
mm,
And I think it starts right at the beginning, right as you walk through the door.
mm,
What is it that you see? What makes you feel comfortable?
mm.
What makes you, what calms you? What you want a zen space
Yeah,
in
totally.
order to walk in. And Au Bon Pain was, the restaurant was not a very good indication that of what was going to see, what you were going to see ahead.
It's really, and again, it's really interesting the words that sometimes, or the paintings, the art. Again, there was a couple of experts at the Feng Shui conference who talked about that. And
That's right.
you go into homes and you're looking at something and you think, why have you got this on your wall? And the people don't even see it because they walk past it all day long. They don't even realize it's there, and it's kind of how bizarre.
It's exactly. Yes. Right.
So
Yeah.
it's really, really cool what you're doing, Julie. I'm so glad we kind of met. And do you have like so how can people connect with you? And do you have a program, or do you do online webinars and stuff like that? How can people, if they hear you and see you and want to, perhaps, have you wandering around their hospital or their surgery.
I'd love to do that with my
Well,
camera.
now that we can start doing that a little, how can they get in
Well,
touch with you?
sure. My my website is Feng Shui Services of New England.
Okay.
And yep, very simple. Feng Shui Services of New England. All my contact information is right there. And I use the initials FSSONE at ymail.com, and that's my email address. And again, you can contact me through the website, Feng Shui Services of New England. And I would love to be able to, chat with nurses, with whoever it is about, about their space, and come at it from the perspective of, basically, like you said, sort of the outside looking in, but really the inside looking in, isn't it? Yeah.
And I think that's the thing as well. People don't realize how much the outside affect inside, and I think that really is that key message. Your outside will connect. You don't know about it. You'll walk somewhere and you get that chill. You don't feel right. You're going to go in, you're going to get whatever you want, and then you come and get out again. Whereas you walk in somewhere, oh, it feels good. You can see things. You feel that relaxed moment. You will
Right.
want to stay there, and that's what Feng Shui is about, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
really
It
about
is.
making people feel good.
I think nurses spend so many conferences and webinars about self-care
Mhm.
because of working in such, difficult environments. But I'm my always going back to my feng shui. If the environment supported them from the beginning,
Yes.
right as they walk in, then they wouldn't feel the need for all the self-care, and which, you know, there are many factors, but I think that one of them can actually be, we could help them more, um, with the knowledge of feng shui and sort of what they have around them and what they have control over.
Mhm.
And then of course there's always layers of management, and sort of what the hospital's willing to offer. But they made some headway. It's slow, but they did make some headway.
I think in all industry, I have to say, I think if anything, perhaps this pandemic has really brought out is that we need to bring more care into our businesses. Um,
Absolutely.
but how are we going to do that? And actually, there's been the last kind of 2-3 months, connecting with all of you guys and doing some clubhouse things and meeting so many Feng Shui experts. It feels like there's a renewal of energy as well, where people kind of really are a little bit intrigued and thinking more holistic. What alternative can we do to make our
Yes.
people feel good?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yes. And I like to always come at, I'm earth energy, we talked about. So I always come at this from a very concrete level. So
Mm.
a very, what's manageable for folks, and what folks can do on a personal level,
Mhm.
and because we talked a little bit about, different types of clutter, invisible clutter, and then invisible clutter. So, you take away, you work on your invisible clutter, which is what's in your head. And then the visible clutter is a group project, and everybody can handle that, and work on that in their environment. And just that alone
Yes.
starts the process.
Yes.
So it takes us, and what do we say in feng shui? Move 9 things. 21 things in 9 days
Yeah.
is 27. Sorry, 27 things in
27 and
9 days, and
days.
start to see the flow change in your environment.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. There's so much as well. I think every day I'm learning something new, whether I'm listening to somebody, whether there's somebody talking about, there's an article somewhere, and I'm like, oh, I've never heard about that. This is so cool. There's so much content and so much things that, we can bring together. It's just beautiful, isn't it? You
it
really,
is. I loved that summit was just absolutely wonderful. And like you, I just learned and met so many wonderful people.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, thank you so much, Julie. It was just amazing. So I will put the link just below, so people can click on it and connect with
Perfect.
you directly on the things. And you're on social media as well. Are you on
No, Facebook, just
Facebook?
Facebook, Feng Shui Services of New England. Yes,
Okay, so
yeah,
Facebook, you need to connect on Facebook. Then the
absolutely.
video will go on YouTube, but then we'll be able to share it all over the other
Okay,
social media
perfect.
platforms as well.
Good. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Bye,
So-
everybody. And if you want to know more videos, just please subscribe as well, and learn, describe, ask questions, and really kind of bring that, how can you feel better in yourself so you can give that great service with other people and you can live a better life by just making some very, very simple changes,
Yeah.
in your environment. So thank you, Julie.
All
See
righty.
you very soon. Bye
Thank
for now.
you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.